Welcome to Incognito Islamic Productions.
Terrorism, this phenomena of terrorism, is used to demonize Islam. And I think we as Muslims are very clear about this. Over the last 15 years, most people, whether you're Muslim or not, will have noticed that there is a constant media coverage of terrorism and Islam, creating a link between the two. What is the definition of terrorism? In fact, there is no agreed definition. Yet, it doesn't stop the media from labeling Islam as the cause for terrorism. Tony Blair said that if you believe in Sharia, this leads to extremism, this leads to terrorism. Tony Blair, he labeled Islam as the evil ideology. If you believe in this, it will lead you to extremism, it will lead you to terrorism. And it is ironic that this country, we spent millions in protecting Salman Rushdie for years because he wrote a book insulting the Muslims and their religion and things that they hold sacred. It's ironic that in this country, which spent millions protecting Salman Rushdie, they arrested a girl in 2007 for writing a poem under the terrorism law. I don't know if you remember the story of Samina Malik. She wrote a poem, but she was charged under terrorism law. You may also recall the Nottingham University student, Rizwan Sabir, a PhD student, studying the issue of terrorism, researching the issue of terrorism. He downloaded a book which is freely available as part of his research. He was charged under terrorism legislation and hounded for weeks, and it was in the media. In East Lancs, the police rolled out a program for the school teachers to identify terrorism in school children. In school children, it was called RAP2. They said indicators of extremism which can lead to violent extremism, which can lead to terrorism, is if a child says salam to another child. If a child goes for Friday prayers. If a child has undue influence over other people in correcting their behavior. He goes, these are indicators of extremism. This is linked to terrorism. If the definition generally accepted for terrorism is that it is using violence against civilian for political aim, none of the examples I have given you fit into that definition. Yet, Muslims are charged under terrorism for writing poetry, for downloading books, for saying salam in the school is an indicator of terrorism. So this is clear that terrorism is used by the politicians in order to demonize Islam. And it's a propaganda. You know, the Nazis had a propaganda chief, Joseph Goebbels. I'm not too sure exactly how you pronounce his name, in the Second World War. He'd be proud of the British government and the American government in what they've achieved in demonizing a community like the Muslims, where the common people will automatically assume that, yeah, terrorism and Islam, there is a link, when in fact there is no link. But due to their propaganda, they have established that link. And how have they done this? They've done this, that whenever there is a crime committed by a Muslim, his religion is always brought into question. And people here in Rochdale are very familiar with that. You know, recently, you had this grooming case in Rochdale. That is a big problem. But what was the debate in the media? What were the headlines? What were the commentators saying about this? They were saying that it's got something to do with their culture, something to do with their religion. Muslim men, they are repressed. That's why they do this. Muslim men, they view women in a negative light. That's why they do it. Muslim men, they are anti-women because of their religion. All this nonsense came out. All this nonsense came out, creating a link, demonizing the Muslims and Islam. But what about the industrial scale abuse by the Catholic Church that went on for decades in various countries around the world, in Britain, in Ireland, in Australia, in Canada, in America. Yet their religion wasn't brought into question. Their values weren't brought into question. Christianity wasn't brought into question. It was a crime committed by individuals. Nothing to do with their religion. When there's this alleged industrial scale abuse by prominent politicians, which has been going on for decades, where they are abusing children in child homes, abusing them. Hundreds of reports have been written about this in files, which have all gone missing. And it's well known. Again, the politician here in Rochdale, what was his, Cyril Smith, he was implicated in this. Not implicated, proven that he was molesting little boys. Their religion is not brought into question. Their secular politics is not brought into question. Their secular values is not brought into question. You've had the industrial scale abuse of children and women by celebrities from the BBC. Secular values haven't been brought into question. Their nation hasn't been brought into question. Their country hasn't been brought into question. Democracy hasn't been brought into question. Oh no, these are crimes committed by individuals. But when a Muslim does it, it's because of Islam. If a Muslim drove his car through the red light, it'd be because it was Islam. If a Muslim parked his car on a double yellow line, it's because he's a Muslim. He's got no respect for our community. But when anybody else does it, it's a crime committed by an individual. And by bombarding the newspapers and the media with stories like this, it creates an impression in the minds of the people that there is a link between Islam and extremism, Islam and violence, Islam and terrorism. When in reality, that doesn't really exist. You know, recently, just give you some examples. You know George Galloway? He was brutally attacked by a Zionist Jew. It was political motivation. Because George Galloway spoke on behalf of the Muslims of Gaza, a Zionist Jew physically attacked him and he was hospitalized. His Judaism wasn't brought into question. His Zionism wasn't brought into question. However, this is an act of terrorism because it was politically motivated violence against the civilian. Terrorism wasn't mentioned. Zionism wasn't mentioned. Judaism wasn't mentioned. Can you imagine if a Muslim attacked a Tory MP of because what he said about Iraq or Syria, what kind of news coverage that would get? You know, there's many cases, I'll mention a few later on, about white extremists who have been arrested. They've got bombs in their house. They've got bomb-making factories in their house. They've got weapons. They've got literature. They are subscribing to extremist political groups. Their values are not brought into question. They are not brought under the terrorism law. They are not arrested for terrorism. And in Burma, Muslims are being massacred by Buddhists. Buddhism isn't brought into question. Muslims are being massacred in Gaza by the Zionists. Zionism or Judaism isn't being brought into question. Muslims in Africa, in Central African Republic, are being slaughtered and eaten alive by Christians. Their Christianity is not being brought into question. Yet when a Muslim commits a crime, it's because he's a Muslim, it's because of Islam. So there is an agenda. There is an agenda which is there to demonize Islam and link it with violence, to link it with crime, to link it with terrorism, and to create a hatred for Islam and Muslims. And to be quite honest, that is pretty much undeniable.